What's up, guys? 0-2 day yesterday. It was not good. The basketball game looked good for the first, almost the first half, I guess, with Charlotte hanging in there. And then they just got wrecked in the second half, kind of. But it was also just a ridiculous shooting performance from the Atlanta Hawks, shooting some absurd three-point percentage, like in the mid 40% range, probably, whereas Charlotte was in like the low 20s. So you can't really do that. And Charlotte lost the turnover battle pretty badly as well. So things did not go their way whatsoever. And then the hockey game, that had a chance, man. It was 0-0 into the late third period, basically. I think Nashville scored the only goal in the game in the final 5 minutes of the game or something. So that's kind of brutal, although Nashville was the better team in the game statistically. They did outplay Detroit, but man, that hurts. We move on to today. I feel like I'm being almost too selective here with very few plays going on. I'm skipping the NBA and the NHL cards today, even though there's a lot to choose from. I just don't really see angles that I like here. So I'm going college basketball with the only play that I have today. And we got, of course, multiple college basketball tournaments going on. We got, obviously, the main tournament. We got the NIT still going on. And we got CBI starting, which, it started last night or yesterday, I think, but we got another round of that going. Looking at the NCAA tournament is where I'm going to go here. And we can talk about what happened yesterday. Yesterday it was a public onslaught yesterday where basically every favorite got through, which, my bracket is still live, I guess, because I have 3 of the Final 4 still alive for now, and my championship matchup is still alive, but we will see what winds up happening. As long as that's the case, you're still live, but we'll see what winds up happening. I needed Michigan State to bounce North Carolina, and that would have been very helpful to me. I had North Carolina getting bounced in that game. So, yeah, it looked decent for almost the entire first half, but the calls were also not going Michigan State's way, and it's just unfortunate. And then I almost got there with Texas. I had Texas bouncing Tennessee in my bracket as well. That would have been very, very helpful, obviously, especially now with the winner of that game now gets to face the team that played the double overtime game yesterday, the Creighton-Oregon double overtime game. That was a crazy game. That was the craziest game of the day, but I would expect Creighton got out of there with a win. I would expect Creighton, well, they're going to have half a week off now. So I was going to say, with a quick turnaround time, they might be in trouble if they only had one day off having to play again, but they do get now the week off basically before they have to play again. So maybe that'll help them rest after that, because that was a crazy game. Still, maybe they're not in the best spot to come out of that. But I don't like the way Tennessee, the way Rick Barnes teams have played in the tournament at all. I just don't think you can trust them. So I had Texas there in my bracket, at least. I thought Texas would slow down the game, make it ugly, which they did. And I thought they'd be an undervalued commodity still, because they play slow, ugly basketball, basically, which they did again yesterday in that game. That was to Texas's pace, and they were in the game. They were within 1 pretty late in the game, but it was at a point where they had to start intentionally fouling. So unfortunate. What can you do? That one almost got there, and that would have helped my bracket as well. But the public continues with the bracket, so hopefully we'll see if that turns around. Hopefully it does. We got today, I have a few leans probably. It does look like JMU is pretty public against Duke, which I actually have Duke in the championship now instead of Marquette. I flipped that one. So the final iteration of my bracket is I had 2 iterations of it, and actually the final one is actually worse than the first one, kind of, but we'll see. Well, the first one I had Oregon getting through Creighton, which probably was actually the right side, but in my current bracket, I actually had Creighton winning that. I went back and forth on that game too, which Creighton was the favorite, but the line kept going down on it. It looked like there was public and maybe some professional action on the Oregon side there, and Oregon was the right side, at least to cover in that one. Maybe they should have won the game too. I don't know, but that was very unfortunate for Oregon, not even coming close to covering in double overtime. That was a game that they certainly should have covered at least. That was a wild one. They almost didn't even score in double overtime. It was like, oh, this game's going into double OT now, and then, Creighton just put up 15 points in a row, and now the game is just over. You don't usually see that, obviously. But yeah, today, so JMU does have the public action, but it does look like they have the majority of the cash too, based on pregame. And I'm looking at right now, it looks like Duke has ticked down a little bit, but I would kind of expect Duke to be able to get through that game. Duke They play slow like Wisconsin does, but Duke is a better team than Wisconsin. Both of those are pacing collisions with James Madison. James Madison, I mean, they outplayed Wisconsin, but that game was also played at Wisconsin's pace. So that's kind of weird, but I think they're going to run up against it against Duke, which this Duke team just seems like they're just flying under the radar, man. It seems like people do not like them after they lost that second game to North Carolina. It seems like people have just kind of been off of them, which is crazy because usually Duke is very, very public, but they are not this tournament, it seems, for the most part. So maybe once it gets into the deeper rounds, maybe they'll become public, but maybe not because they are a 4 seed. So people like this trendy James Madison underdog, and I would hesitate to get involved with that one. I don't particularly like that one. Marquette looks like they're a very small favorite. They've gone up from 2.5 to 4.5 against Colorado. They look like they have the public action a bit and a little bit less of the cash. So James Madison has 73% of the cash, 71% of the tickets, according to this. Marquette, 65% of the tickets, 62% of the cash. So public with the cash discrepancy going against them. But Colorado, I would hesitate to want to be on Colorado after the game that they played in the first round, which I was on Colorado there. They played an absolute barn burner of a game, and that game was just a wild game, a crazy game, where they wound up scoring over 100 points. That's going to look good, whereas Marquette did not look very good in what wound up being a pretty easy victory over Western Kentucky, but they were losing that game at halftime, even though they wound up winning by double digits and wound up not having to put in an effort to the wire like Colorado did, because Colorado took their foot off the gas too early, and they were up 13 with a few minutes left and let who are they playing? Florida get right back into it and tie the game. So Colorado had to expend energy all the way to the wire there and looked good at scoring over 100 points and beating a Florida team that people consider to be good. So I don't know, even though the public is on Marquette here, I just don't know what Colorado's going to have left in the tank, having to turn around with one day off after that crazy game, whereas Marquette was able to flip their game around and just kind of put it away pretty easily. So even though the line looks suspiciously short on Marquette, which would kind of lead you to believe there's something kind of fishy going on there. Like, how is the 2 seed only favored by that much over the 10 seed? Colorado has been good. They've been playing really good basketball recently. They're certainly not a bad team. They're not that much worse than Marquette, as the line is telling you, but I just don't like Colorado coming off an 100-point performance, barn burner. So I could not take Colorado in that game, really. I do lean to the Clemson side against Baylor. I mean, Baylor's obviously going to be the public team. 70% of the tickets, 59% of the cash. They're the higher seed. Everybody likes Baylor. They like their offense. Clemson plays a much, much uglier style game. Baylor blew out Colgate, which nobody's really going to care about, but put up over 90 points in that game. Whereas Clemson, I mean, even though they beat New Mexico easily, unfortunately for my bracket, it's not like they looked great in doing so, really. I don't think people are going to really weigh that very heavily for Clemson. Clemson won that game pretty impressively, though, I would say. I did not expect Clemson to win that game that easily. So Clemson coming into this game, Clemson's decently equipped to match up well with Baylor in this game here. So I lean to taking Clemson with the points here. Clemson plays better defense than Baylor. That's the main thing. Ken Pom has Clemson in like the 40s, somewhere in that range, defensive efficiency-wise, with Baylor being in like the 70s. So Baylor, even though they're one of the best offensive teams in the country, although they also kind of play slow, which also is kind of is that what Clemson does too? I think Clemson also plays fairly slow. Yeah. So there's no pacing collision here because both of these teams like to play a bit slow. Baylor, the better offensive efficiency team, but Clemson not that bad offensively, really. Ken Pom has them, I think, in like the 20s offensively, which is pretty good. So even though Baylor's better offensively, the biggest difference between how good these teams are on either side of the ball is Clemson being the significantly better defense. So you get the better defense getting points against a public team. I would lean to Clemson in that one. I would not be shocked if they get through into the next round. It would probably help me because I'm sure a lot of people in the brackets have Baylor getting through to the Sweet 16, and I do not. I had New Mexico getting there, very unfortunately. Should not trust the Mountain West, even though I'm going to trust the Mountain West in my game today. Oh, God. It looks like there is a discrepancy on the Houston-Texas A&M game. Houston down from 11 to 9.5, 55% of the tickets on them, 60% of cash on the other side on Texas A&M. I mean, this is a big little brother Texas situation where Texas A&M gets to kind of go back into Big 12 land and face the team that's new to the Big 12 is Texas A&M, a team that left the Big 12 not that long ago. So, but Texas A&M also playing little brother to Houston in the sport of basketball for a while now as well. Maybe Texas A&M will get up for this game, and Texas A&M has been kind of an enigma because they played a slow pace for a while, which is kind of like Buzz Williams kind of likes to do that. I think he is their coach, but then he realized that he basically had to unleash. I forget their guard's name. They're really talented guard they have on Texas A&M to really get anything done. So he kind of like took the chains off and like was able to say, all right, now we need to speed it up a little bit and like let this offense go, play some offense, kind of unleash the offense. But so Texas A&M, it's like they can kind of play like at different paces and still succeed, which is weird. And they were able to get through that Nebraska team pretty easily. A Nebraska team that likes to speed up the game. And that game was at a faster pace. And Texas A&M was still able to score an impressive amount in that game. So I don't know. I mean, their market read looks pretty strong on A&M, having knocked the line down and having a pros versus Joes almost type of look to this one with the cash discrepancy on A&M. Houston won in a ridiculous blowout in the first game, but of course it was against a 16 seed Longwood. And I guess people probably won't be that impressed with Texas A&M beating Nebraska, although I kind of was. So I leaned to A&M plus the points in that one, but who knows? I'm not going to be on that one. The game I'm on, I'm actually going against the market read. So, and then I also lean against Alabama. They got 62% of the tickets, 51% of the cash, playing Grand Canyon. Alabama only a 6-point favorite. That maybe looks a little bit suspicious because people like Alabama. I mean, Alabama, everybody knows Alabama. They score a ton, but Alabama is also the worst defensive team left in the tournament now at this point that made it through the first round. KenPom has Alabama ranked worse than 100th in defensive efficiency at 117th. He has them third in offense and 7th in tempo. So extremely fast, high-scoring team that just plays absolutely no defense, which they beat Charleston, and they scored over 100, I believe, against Charleston in a ridiculously high-scoring game. But Charleston is similar to Alabama, just worse at everything, and that Charleston is much more offensive than defensive, has a bad defense, and they play a fast tempo as well. So it's just Alabama basically is just a way better version of Charleston. So Charleston could not keep up with them. But in this game, Alabama's facing a Grand Canyon team that actually is not bad defensively. KenPom has them 56th in offense. So that's not bad either. A 42nd in defense, and then slower tempo as well at 116. So you're getting a Grand Canyon team that has more balance, that is the better defense over Alabama, and actually somewhat significantly can also still score. So they have a good enough offense to maybe even be able to trade points with Alabama if their defense is holding up their end of the bargain. And they play a slower pace than Alabama, so they might be able to slow the pace down and be efficient enough on offense and play good enough defense that they're able to hang in that game. So I do like Grand Canyon in that one. People might be more impressed with Alabama with their high-scoring offense, putting up over 100 in the first game, which looks quite good, whereas I don't know if they're going to be that impressed with Grand Canyon beating St. Mary's. I think Grand Canyon was a little bit of a public underdog in that one, although I know a lot of professional bettors also liked Grand Canyon in that one, which, unfortunate for my bracket, I needed St. Mary's to just escape in that one because I liked St. Mary's in this game against Alabama because St. Mary's was going to be getting fewer, like it was going to be a closer line with St. Mary's. St. Mary's is only going to be a dog of like a couple points here, and with the way better defense and the way slow down team, I liked that matchup for St. Mary's here, but they did not get here. So, but I leaned Grand Canyon in that one. It was one that I was close to making a play on. The game I'm actually going to make a play on, I'm actually going against everything I see in the market. I'm playing on San Diego State -5.5. They got 61% of the tickets, 51% of the cash. So they're a little bit public. The cash discrepancy is against them, and they're down from 6.5 to 5.5. But I'm still going to do this. This is the type of game. I mentioned Illinois yesterday. I probably should have played Illinois. They just easily just took Duquesne out. It was nowhere. It was never close. I should have done that because Illinois was coming off a game where it was just kind of ho-hum. They didn't look that good. I wish that it was a real scare for Illinois against Moorhead because then I would have been on Illinois yesterday. But Duquesne was coming off that big upset over BYU. They were not in the best one. The way Duquesne actually celebrated at the end of that game, like that was a huge game because that was the first time that program has been in the tournament since the 1970s. I don't know when the last time they won a tournament game was, but they were celebrating that. That was a huge win for that program. The players actually kind of like ran into the crowd almost and were celebrating with their fans. That was like winning a game in the tournament for them was almost like a championship game. And like, I think maybe kind of knowing they weren't going to be able to beat a team that's like so much better than they are, like Illinois, a team that can just score so much better than they can. So they were just kind of, they were just a team that kind of like shot their wad in the first round, which, yeah, I should have factored that in. Maybe that would have put that one over the top for me because I liked Illinois in that one. Probably should have done it, even though it would have been laying 10 points. It was an easy win and cover for Illinois yesterday. I should have done that instead of losing on non-college basketball. But this is a spot I like, as I was going to say, for San Diego State against Yale. Yale, what are they going to have left in the tank, man? They just upset Auburn. That's a monster win for that Yale program, man. Huge win for Yale. That was a good matchup kind of for Yale because, look, Auburn, I mean, I had Auburn in the Final Four in my bracket. They're ranked 4th in KenPom. I was expecting them to maybe not have a great game in that game against Yale, but because they were a 13, 14-point favorite, you don't expect them to actually lose the game. It's like, well, maybe they'll win by like 8 or 10 or something. And it was looking that way for a while. Like they can get through that game even if they don't play their best game. And they wound up completely getting caught. Like I said, Auburn had run through the SEC and played multiple games in the SEC tournament, won the SEC tournament. So they were not in the greatest spot there. Whereas in Yale in the Ivy tournament, you only have to play 2 games. And Yale actually suffered a major scare in the Ivy final, almost losing to Brown. Brown almost was able to upset both the top 2 teams in the conference, which would have been crazy. They upset Princeton. So Yale was in the better spot in that game. And Yale plays a much slower tempo than Auburn does. So that was a decent matchup for Yale if they were able to slow down the game enough, which I believe they were. I mean, the game was like in the 70s by the end of it. So that was slow enough that Yale was able to stay in the game. Even though Auburn, very, very good and they're definitely a balanced team. That was a good matchup for Yale. Whereas in this game, I don't think it's a good spot for Yale, and I don't think it's as good a matchup for Yale because Yale plays the slower pace. Well, San Diego State also plays a slower pace, and San Diego State's just better at it, and they're used to it. So it's like, even if this game plays to Yale's preferred pace, which it should because it's also San Diego State's preferred pace, basically a slower tempo, I think that just benefits San Diego State just because they're the better team here. And San Diego State, with the quick turnaround time here, this is the spot that you like to look for in the tournament, man, because you have Yale, the inferior team, coming off a crazy, crazy upset, like almost a monumental upset, which Oakland also was in yesterday's game, but I couldn't go against Oakland because NC State was also coming off a crazy kind of a crazy upset in theirs too. Well, not as crazy looking, but that game wound up going into overtime. So forgot to mention that game. That was a crazy overtime game where Oakland almost was able to get to the Sweet 16 as a 14 seed. So that was a spot where normally I would have liked to look to fade Oakland off of the huge upset win over Kentucky, but because they were facing an 11 seed that also pulled off an upset, I just couldn't get there with it. Could not quite do that there. But Yale, San Diego State, Yale pulled off the other monumental upset in the first round. They have to turn around with only 1 day off and face another pretty good team. It's like, what are they going to have left in the tank, man? And the San Diego State team, another good defense as well, another physical team with this little rest with a Yale team that just maybe is going to be a little bit beat up and can't really handle the physicality of these bigger conference teams, like 2 games in 3 days like that, and maybe they're not used to doing it and don't have the coaching for it. I don't think it's a good spot for Yale. Whereas San Diego State, I mean, they're kind of used to it at this point, even though they've had some turnaround from last year's team. They still have a couple guys back from last year's championship run, and they have the same coach, of course. So this is a coach, and they have some player personnel who are used to being in this tournament environment, used to having the quick turnaround time and playing again. So I think that benefits San Diego State. You got the experience on their side. And whereas Yale might have nothing left in the tank, it might just be too beat up after that performance against Auburn, coming off just such a monumental win. San Diego State almost lost to UAB, even though San Diego State, well, I mean, it got pretty dicey, I would say. At least it was a scare for San Diego State. They were winning the game for a long portion of it, and then by the end of it, it got too close for comfort, I would say. And San Diego State was only able to get out of there with like a 4-point win that really doesn't even look impressive, really. So I'm kind of surprised the public's even on San Diego State to the extent that they are. You'd think that Yale might just be a little trendy because, well, Yale just beat Auburn. So if they beat Auburn outright, of course they're going to be able to cover a spread, where they're getting some points against the San Diego State team who's not as good as Auburn, right? Like I would think that there would be some of that sentiment here, even though I'm not seeing that in the market really. It seems like that would kind of be the sentiment coming into this. Whereas San Diego State, they looked bad against UAB, man, and like Yale might be like even a little bit better than UAB, right? Yeah, I'm not so sure about that really. Yeah, we'll see, I guess, but. San Diego State coming off what I think is a scare as a favorite in that game, although they weren't like a huge favorite in that one. I think they were about the same. I think the line was about the same as it is in this game, which also, yeah, I don't know. Does that mean this is a little bit short? I don't even know which team is power rated higher. Yale is probably power rated better than yeah, so Yale is actually a little bit better. Yeah, so I don't know. So maybe that means that San Diego State should actually not be as heavy of a favorite as they are here. But I still think this is one of those kind of classic tournament matchups. So you have the better team, San Diego State, coming off a game that became a scare as a favorite where they should have won more easily than they did. So they did not look good. It was not a very high-scoring game. San Diego State, so that might shock them into focus. Like I said, they have much more tournament experience in this Yale program. They have the coach who's been here and done that before. They have some players on the team that were here last year as well. They have the experience. They know what it takes to turn around and play a second game in 3 days like this in the tournament. So San Diego State's got the experience on their side. And you got Yale, who had to put in a major max effort to pull off like a crazy win for that program against Auburn. So it's like, what will they even have left? And like, are they going to be kind of like Duquesne where it's like, well, that's like kind of where like the Cinderella run stops? Not really a Cinderella run, but because you just won one game. But is that where like the run kind of stops for that team where they just really just have nothing left to give? Basically, did they shoot their wad too much in that first game really, and they're just the inferior team coming into this one? That might be the case with Yale here. Not used to having to have this quick turnaround time, although the Ivy actually does do that, though. Like the Ivy, I believe, always does this like Friday, Sunday thing. So they actually do that, but not against teams that are as good as and as physical and as great defensively as San Diego State is. So I like the spot for San Diego State, so I'm going to lay the points. And then, like I said, there's no pacing advantage here for Yale like they had in that first game too, and they won't have the advantage of facing a team that just ran through the SEC and won the SEC tournament either, because they got San Diego State who San Diego State made the Mountain West final though, but they turned around and they were able to win against UAB. So I like San Diego State in this one. Laying the points. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm towed. -5.5, I believe, is that one. It's the only play today. March Madness. Peace.